Chapter 398 The Terrifying Red Ray of Light. Xizing nodded. He was someone who graduated from the Martial Soul Department, and thus knew quite a bit about the rivalry between the two departments. During recent years, the Soul Tool Department had grown at an increasing rate, and had signs of surpassing the Martial Soul Department. On the other hand, the Martial Soul Department was slowing down somewhat. Even Dean Yenxiaozi, who had strong views against the use of Soul Tools, seemed to have relented slightly, transferring a large amount of the Academy's resources to the Soul Tool Department. At this moment, a low roar suddenly rang out in the distance. Right after that, countless beasts cried out in response. Over 2 hours had passed since the light of dawn. Was the Great Stardow Forest's beast tide going to attack again? The Soul Masters who were originally meditating opened their eyes with deathly pale expressions. Although they had resolute gazes, their eyes had a tinge of despair in them. Xizing looked towards Shenliner, who nodded back at him. The fact that Xizing was chosen as the highest city defense officer was not only a testament to how calm he was, but also how decisive he was. The moment he made a decision, he immediately handed down his orders. All Soul Masters in the City Defense Army, head down to your bunkers and continue resting. All auxiliary troops, retreat 50 meters and rest on the city walls. Wait for further commands. The soldiers in the City Defense Army couldn't help but look at each other after hearing Xizing's command. They were at a loss for a brief period of time. The great beast tide was about to descend on them, but their commander was actually ordering them to rest. Just what sense did that make? Were they not able to hold the soul beasts back? I've already given my orders. Do you not understand? Xizing shouted angrily. The job of a soldier was to listen to one's superior. Although the City Defense Army didn't quite understand the purpose behind their commander's orders, the strict training they'd undergone every day made them move immediately. They quickly withdrew to the bunkers below the city walls. The auxiliary troops retreated as well, and quickly, the lack of soldiers on the city walls created a large gap. Xizing, however, did not retreat. He was the city defense officer, and regardless of how much he trusted Shenliner, he had to remain to ensure that the Tang Sect truly did have the capabilities to hold back the next assault. If anything were to go wrong, he could command his subordinates to provide aid as quickly as possible. The army of soul beasts from the Great Stardow Forest made their move. A large number of soul beasts started charging wildly, causing clouds of dust to rise in the distance. Amid the wild roars coming from that direction, a large number of soul beasts rushed towards Shrek City. When Xizing was finally able to see the large charging army clearly, his expression changed instantly. This time around, the emerald swan by G wasn't the one leading the great army of soul beasts. Another soul beast was tasked with that. This soul beast was an existence that resembled an enormous lion floating in the sky, but it had 3 large heads and glowed with a scarlet red light. It was this soul beast that had let out that roar earlier. Of the 10 great savage beasts, this was the 8th ranked soul beast, the 3-headed scarlet devil mastiff, the Scarlet King. By G also had to rest. This was especially the case after she went all out assisting the entire soul beast army, which had taxed her soul power greatly. After an entire day and night of fighting, the commander of the army of soul beasts had been swapped to the Scarlet King. Xizing should have been slightly more relaxed due to the disappearance of Bai Ji, but the reason why his expression had changed earlier wasn't because of the new commander of the soul beast army. Instead, it was because of the appearance of a dark cloud in the sky above the army. An army of flying type soul beasts had revealed itself on the battlefield. There were quite a few soul beasts who could fly. However, there were relatively few flying type soul beasts in the Great Star Forest. This was because of the high chance of these soul beasts being shot down by ranged attacks if they flew above the forest. Because of that, flying type soul beasts that didn't live near the very edge of the forest, or were very powerful, would find it extremely difficult to live in the Great Stardow Forest. There weren't that many flying type soul beasts before them now, only 1,000 or so. However, even 1,000 soul beasts could form a black cloud in the air. There were various kinds of flying type soul beasts within the cloud, and they flickered with different colors. There was no vanguard who led their charge. Instead, they all flew steadily forward together. An attack consisting of both aerial and ground attacks would clearly be much more difficult to handle. The reason why the Great Stardow Forest hadn't used flying type soul beasts before was because they were extremely precious. At this moment, however, they'd mobilized their aerial troops to increase the intensity of their attack, for the sake of defeating Shrek City in one shot. Although this aerial army wasn't the strongest they could muster, their ability to harass Shrek City would definitely affect their defensive capabilities greatly. Without the golden tree protecting the city, the soul tool barriers surrounding Shrek City could only block a frontal attack. They weren't able to guard against aerial attacks. The harassment the aerial army of soul beasts could thus bring could be imagined. The soul beast flying in front of the aerial army was the one who had previously fought against Elder Song, the 6-winged devil tiger. An aerial army led by a 100,000-year soul beast couldn't be underestimated. Moreover, the strength of the beast tide on the ground had at least doubled in strength. With Xizing's eyesight, he was naturally able to tell that there were no longer any soul beasts that were weaker than 100 years in the beast tide. The number of 1,000 and 10,000-year soul beasts had increased as well. The strong undulations of soul power coming from them made it seem as though Mount Tai was pressing down on them. How are we going to fight this? Xizing was deep in thought. If he were the one commanding the Shrek City Defense Army, the only way he could deal with this would be to use a large number of stationary soul cannons to launch a simultaneous attack on both the aerial and ground-based armies. Only by launching an all-out attack that risked their lives would they have a chance of stopping this wave. However, what would they do about the next wave if they did this? What could they do? Dean Shen, I'll ask the soldiers to come back. Could you go and ask the elders to assist us? Otherwise, we won't be able to defend against both the aerial and ground armies. Shenliner glanced at Xizing and said, don't just do things on your own. Trust the Tang Sect. But Xizing was feeling somewhat anxious. It wasn't that he didn't trust the Tang Sect, but the beast hide in front of him and the previous two were completely different. Just as he wanted to continue speaking, a series of sudden clangs caught his ear. Right after that, a number of huge creatures quickly rose from the area behind the walls, then quickly proceeded to the top of the city wall. What is this? Xizing nearly choked on his words as he stared blankly at these monsters that were completely made of metal. Right, these things could only be described as monsters. If one had to find a living creature resembling these things, only a porcupine would fit the bill. Only, did a porcupine have this larger head? Was there a porcupine that had a diameter of 2 meters? Was it 100,000-year one? These enormous porcupines had 8 metallic legs underneath their bellies. After they scaled the city walls, they rapidly moved forward. Other than the metallic legs underneath their round bodies, there were various metal spikes protruding from them. There were conical-shaped ones, tube-shaped ones, and other spikes of various shapes. Every single porcupine had at least 60 of these protrusions. Amidst the sounds of clanging metal, they traveled forward quickly. After a few breaths of time, around 60 of these metallic porcupines had scaled the city walls. Moreover, they quickly arranged themselves in a tidy manner. Right after that, several hundred soldiers who were fully covered in metal began to quickly line up. There were a few of them who looked very young, but they were all able to move very quickly. Roughly 5 of them followed each single metallic porcupine as they lined up quickly. Within a mere 10 minutes, a total of 61 metallic porcupines were lined up in an orderly manner on top of the city walls, replacing the Shrek City Defense Army. Dean Shen, what are these? Xizing couldn't help but ask. He was extremely curious. These are all-terrain self-driving forts. I'm a bit ashamed to say this, but they were invented by the Sun Moon Empire. Teacherson brought them over to Shrek, then remodeled them for us. He reduced their flexibility and removed various abilities, but was able to increase their offensive capabilities. Just watch. The things climbing up the city walls were all-terrain self-driving forts. Unlike the original iteration of the all-terrain self-driving fort, the remodeled ones were slightly smaller. Furthermore, the materials used to construct them had been changed slightly. Instead of using rare metals, it used iron essence as its main material. Rare metals were simply too expensive. In Sun Wen's own words, using rare metals would be a waste of resources. Using iron essence to construct an all-terrain self-driving fort resulted in its defenses being equivalent to that of a class 3 or 4 soul barrier. This was already enough for Sun Wen. Unlike the outer casing of the fort, which he decided to skimp on, Sun Wen demanded perfection in its formation arrays. Every single internal component and formation array of the all-terrain self-driving forts had been created by students of Shrek Academy and disciples of the Tang Sect, who had all been taught by him. They would only be mounted in the forts after he had personally checked them. The outer casing of these 61 all-terrain self-driving forts were all created using Shrek Academy's resources. They were originally meant to provide immediate assistance in any battles that Shrek Academy would fight in the future. However, nobody thought that they would first be used to defend the city. Naturally, credit had to be given to Huo Yuao, who had brought back a large amount of rare metals from the Sun Moon Empire. This was why they were able to create so many all-terrain self-driving forts in such a short period of time. Their outer shells were finished much earlier. However, Shrek Academy was only able to perfect their weapons and formation arrays after obtaining those rare metals. After just over a month, they were able to assemble the first batch of forts. The Tang Sect hadn't decided whether they would put them on the market yet. Shrek Academy had only ordered 100 of them. Right now, they'd only completed 61 of the 100, and thus hadn't finished their order yet. Every single all-terrain self-driving fort could fit 3 people in it, or even 4 if they were squeezed together. 100, in turn, could fit 400 people. From the Academy's point of view, these forts were quite good at both attacking and defending. Along with the Juga Divine crossbow cannons, the all-terrain self-driving forts were projects that the Academy strongly supported. At this moment, even Shen Liner wanted to see how powerful these forts were. From her point of view, this was another way of fighting with larger soul forts. Sun Zwen's cold voice rang out from one of the all-terrain forts. All units, pay attention. All units, pay attention. Charge your main cannons. Target the enemy's air force. Charging, start. After hearing Sun Zwen's words, all of the all-terrain forts started moving. The disciples of the Tang Sect were controlling them, and they had been with Sun Zwen for a very long time. They didn't just respect their teacher Sun, they were also very familiar with his temper. If anyone were to mess up any orders this teacher gave, they wouldn't be let off with a simple scolding. They would be punished corporally, as well. Because of that, their movements were extremely tidy. All of the all-terrain forts planted themselves on the ground, then lowered their metallic legs, causing them to remain just centimeters off of the ground. After that, their ball-shaped bodies leaned 30 degrees forward, before revealing enormous ring-shaped cannons that were around 2 feet long. These cannons were somewhat strange. They didn't protrude too much, and unlike the thorns on their main bodies, they were much smaller, only around a handspan long. However, the tips of the cannons started to look very unique as they started charging. Rays of light started to form a pattern within the cannons. Quickly, hexagons made of light were assembled inside the cannons, and a dark red light started to surge within. Ripples immediately started to appear in the air surrounding the all-terrain forts. From this, it could be seen how terrifyingly hot the cannons were. If Shizing were able to see the inner construction of the forts, he would have had a way different impression of how terrifyingly strong its main cannon was. A semicircle protruded from the roof of the all-terrain forts' inner structure. This semicircle was around a foot long, and it practically covered the entirety of the all-terrain forts' roof. This cannon was a class 6 soul tool. Moreover, it was a special one that Sun Zwen had personally modified. The aerial soul-beast army was also able to see these strange-looking creatures above Shrek City. The 6-winged devil tiger who stood at the very front of the army couldn't help but feel somewhat weirded out. Just what are those metallic porcupines? Why are they lighting up? Could they be another human-made weapon? However, it didn't feel any sense of crisis. Out of all of the soul beasts present, it was the first 100,000-year existence participating in this battle. As such, it naturally felt very confident in its abilities. A weapon made by humans could still be usable on ordinary soul beasts, but it was still far too weak to take on an existence such as itself. With it leading the charge, there wouldn't be in too much danger unless a human titled Douluo made a move. And what if a titled Douluo did make a move? There were 1,000 of its little brothers next to it, all of which specialized in long-range attacks. If a human dared to soar into the air, he or she would have to taste the feeling of being shot at by all of them. Human soul masters would never be able to beat soul beasts in sheer quantity. This was even truer when taking aerial troops into account. Shrek Academy was considered the area with the highest density of soul masters in the world. However, there were only around 100 or so soul masters who were soul sages or stronger. Naturally, 4-ring soul masters and above could fly using the assistance of flying type soul tools, but Shrek City had to face the entirety of the soul beast army, who could spare enough strength to deal with the aerial soul beasts in front of them. The 6-winged devil tiger had a very simple order: distract the humans and attack them alongside the ground-based soul beasts. Shizing's gaze was fixed towards the outside of the city. The great soul beast army was getting increasingly closer, and they were now only 5 kilometers away from Shrek City. Once they got within a kilometer of the city, 10,000-year and 100,000-year soul beasts would be able to reach the city using their long-range attacks. On the other hand, all of Shrek City's soul masters had been sent away, and even soul barriers couldn't be used. How would they defend against the soul beasts? Furthermore, the enemy's aerial forces were getting closer and closer. If they didn't ask for help now, there was a chance that they wouldn't be able to in a bit. Dean Shen. Shizing couldn't help but cry out again. Shen Liner acted as though nothing had happened as she said casually, "Don't be impatient. Just watch. Even if something happens, aren't we here? Main cannon charging complete. Main cannon charging complete." A somewhat young voice rang out, and quickly, 60 other voices followed, announcing the completion of their main cannons charging. If anyone were to look in the direction of an all-terrain fort, they would discover that it had turned into a sea of red. However, one could faintly see a light gold hexagram in the middle of the sea of red. Shizing could tell from the side that Shen Liner wasn't worried at all. In any case, there was no use in him panicking alone. 4 kilometers. 3 kilometers. The soul beast army's long-range assault was about to start. The larger and more powerful soul beasts within the tide had already begun to store up energy. Once they entered their effective attack range, a large number of long-range attacks would pour down on Shrek City. Just at this moment, Sun Zwen's indifferent voice rang out via his sound-amplifying soul tool. Main cannons, fire together at my command. All together. Fire. It seemed as though nothing in the world other than topics related to soul tools could pique Sun Zwen's interest. He used an extreme disinterested voice as he announced the start of their attack. A thin beam of red light that was completely unsynchronized from the main cannon surged into the sky. This beam looked way too weak, and it was only as thick as a thumb. If one didn't carefully look out for it, they would not be able to notice its existence on this humongous battlefield. This beam was launched from the enormous cannon that had created the golden hexagram. It didn't travel for long. Instead, it stopped in midair. However, it was only about 50 meters away from the all-terrain fort that Sun Zwen controlled. Immediately after the red light reached the peak of its path, a ball of light appeared in its place. This ball wasn't too big, only around the size of a human head. Neither the humans nor soul beasts thought much of it. What could a red beam of light do? However, 60 other thin beams of light shot out from every single all-terrain fort in the next instant, seemingly all at the same time. All of them seemed to be directed at the small red ball. This ball quickly expanded, and within the blink of an eye, it was a meter wide. 2 kilometers. The great army of soul beasts was only 2 kilometers away from Shrek City's walls. The distance at which they could launch their long-range attacks was getting closer and closer, and the aerial army led by the 6-winged devil tiger was approaching them at the same rate. For the sake of avoiding unnecessary losses, they in fact moved slower than the ground-based soul beasts. Once the fighting below started, they would start their harassment via aerial attacks. Without any prior warning nor any loud noise, a red beam of light a meter thick shot out from the ball of light. Its target wasn't the ground, but the air. The red beam of light was rather obvious on the battlefield. Though it didn't look powerful or dominating, the fact that it spanned the entire sky made it look breathtaking. The soul beasts didn't know how far human-made soul tools could reach, and neither did the soul masters in Shrek City. Ordinarily, soul rays that could reach a distance of 200 meters were considered rather good. Ordinary soul cannons could reach 500 to 1,000 meters. Different classes of soul tools had different ranges, but any soul tool that had a range exceeding a kilometer was at least class 5. If one wanted a soul tool that could attack something 5 kilometers away, only a class 7 soul tool could do the job. Stationary soul tools generally had longer attack ranges, because the cannon shells they used could be equipped with devices that helped them fly longer, which would increase their attack range. At this moment, however, the bombardment Sun Zwen ordered exceeded everyone's expectations. That powerful beam of red light was able to instantly cross over 4 kilometers, and was targeted at the massive number of soul beasts in the air. Is that thing aimed at me? The first thing that came to the 6-winged devil tiger's mind was disdain as it looked at the red light approaching it. Are these humans brain dead? What meaning is there in directly attacking a 100,000-year powerhouse like me? A ball of white light quickly formed a shield in front of it. The 6-winged devil tiger had 3 elements, one of which was light. The element of light had its strong points when it came to defense, and although the 6-winged devil tiger held its opponent's attack in contempt, it was able to tell that the red beam of light was fire-based. Thus, using light to defend against it would have a rather decent effect. It reacted quickly enough, and the red beam wasn't quick enough to make it to the 6-winged devil tiger before it was able to complete its defense. By the time it reached the great soul beast, its defense had already been completed, and the red light and the white barrier collided with each other. Even the soul beast in charge of leading the entire army of soul beasts, the 3-headed scarlet devil mastiff, couldn't help but curl his lips after looking at the human's seemingly feeble attempt to resist. What are they even trying to do with an attack of this level? What? Just as the feeling of disdain appeared in the Scarlet King's heart, his eyes immediately widened in the next instant. What did he see? He saw an astonishing red light that instantly pierced through the sky. The barrier of light that the six-winged devil tiger had created instantly disappeared before the red beam of light. After that, its chest was directly pierced through. Even a 100,000-year soul beast wouldn't be able to survive a meter-thick soul ray that pierced through its chest. The six-winged devil tiger only realized how terrifying that ray was after it hit him. All of the energy within this soul ray had been condensed into a single beam, and none of it had spilled out. This was why it had previously thought that the soul ray was no threat to it. Not only that, but the heat contained within this ray far exceeded its imagination. The terrifying attack power of this soul ray was simply too great, and the soul power protecting it only caused the red beam to pause for a moment before it pierced through the savage beast. Regret. There was no longer any time for the six-winged devil tiger to react, as it had lost all of its senses after the line of fire burned it to ashes. Its enormous body was vaporized in midair. After passing through the six-winged devil tiger, the beam of red light reached the rest of the aerial soul beast army. Since even 100,000-year soul beasts couldn't block the attack, how else would the other weaker soul beasts fare? A line appeared in midair. The corpses of aerial soul beasts fell wherever this line passed through. What was even more terrifying was that this beam of red light didn't disappear after that attack. Instead, it paused roughly 5 kilometers from the red ball of light. After that, it made a sweeping motion, like an enormous sword cutting through the air. It swept from left to right, then back to its original location. However, this back and forth motion was like a giant eraser in the sky that completely wiped away an uncountable number of dots there. Over 2/3 of the 1,000-man-strong aerial army of soul beasts were obliterated by this sweeping motion. The army of soul beasts had been too confident in themselves. After all, did it matter how concentrated they were, considering they were being led by a 100,000-year soul beast? However, that red beam of light had come too quickly. By the time it started sweeping through the sky, none of the soul beasts had even noticed it. The entire sequence of events went very smoothly, and the terrifying beam of light disappeared immediately afterwards. Only the luckiest soul beasts managed to escape with their lives intact. However, they nonetheless began to fall from the sky. It wasn't because they were injured, but because of fear, an overwhelming sensation of terror. The terrifying red light that had obliterated their fellows instantly became a shadow hanging over their hearts. All of this was simply too terrifying. Who would have thought that the proud flying soul beasts courageously advancing would lose over 2/3 of their forces to humanity's first attack? None of the soul beasts who had touched the red beam of light had managed to avoid death. Even the 100,000-year soul beast who led the flock. A power like this had already exceeded the realm of knowledge of the soul beasts there. Even a powerhouse like the beast god Ditian would have a certain process to go through before launching an attack like that. However, the humans were simply far too quick. Shizing stood atop the city wall, his mouth agape. He felt extremely exuberant, and all of his worries seemed to fade away. This was simply too overbearing. A red beam of light swept through the sky, and everything was silent afterwards. The few surviving soul beasts that had fallen from the sky started to turn tail and run away after landing. The depth of their terror destroyed their will to fight. The great beast tide was only 1 kilometer away from Shrek City's walls. However, they were able to see everything that had occurred in the sky. The soul beasts that were originally prepared to assault the city now looked like fools, and it seemed they had completely forgotten about their assault. There were simply no long-range attacks being fired at the city walls right now. At this moment, Sun Swen's voice, an extremely unpleasant sound to the soul beasts, once again rang out from the sound-amplifying soul tool. All teams, fire at will. Carpet bomb them. Clang, clang, clang. With a series of metallic clangs, the cannons on the hedgehog-like all-terrain soul forts lined up. The topmost part of the soul fort's main cannon slid shut, and the 8 legs below them started to prop them up. Moving a few steps forward, they were now just behind the battlements. All their cannons were pointed towards the beast tide, and in the next instant, a rain of light started to descend. Countless soul light rays and soul cannons started to pour down like droplets of rain from Shrek City's walls. The 61 all-terrain soul forts were just like 61 killing machines as they poured down the firepower. The 300 soul engineers guarding the rear of the soul forts raised the metallic rods on their shoulders, then pushed them into an aperture on the side of the soul forts. They began pouring their soul power into the soul forts. The morale of the beast tide was brought to its lowest the instant the aerial army was devastated. That strike was simply too terrifying. The blood-colored soul ring left behind by the six-winged devil tiger, as well as the soul bone that a 100,000-year soul beast was bound to drop, was still floating in midair. All of this was simply too sudden, too shocking. To Shrek, that single strike was stunning. To the soul beasts, however, it was a painting of death. When the soul forts started launching their firepower, Shizing finally understood what was meant by a storm of carnage. The Juga divine crossbow cannons were considered extremely powerful weapons on the battlefield. However, the all-terrain soul forts had a wider range, the ability to continuously fire, and were more accurate. Several thousand rays of light were fired from the city walls towards the army of soul beasts. They began sweeping through the army immediately, just like the red beam that had swept through the sky earlier. A large majority of these soul rays were red in color. Trauma, oh the trauma. They were all red in color, but they didn't have an overly strong appearance to them. However, who'd know if one of those rays was just as strong as the one from earlier? Although the soul beasts acted like they weren't afraid of death, they weren't truly unafraid to die. This was especially true for a useless sacrifice. Who'd be willing to die that way? The volley from the all-terrain soul forts created a wall of death a kilometer away from Shrek City. Every single soul beast that dared to enter this range received a baptism of light rays. The number of casualties to the soul beast army immediately increased at a staggering rate. Without the emerald swan to heal them, the soul beasts could only watch as they were annihilated by the soul rays. Panic started to increase among the ranks of the soul beasts as their casualties increased. The ones in front had already started to turn tail in fear, but the ones behind them still continued to charge ahead. This was the first time since the start of the beast tide that chaos had occurred within the ranks of the soul beasts army. Soul beasts were savage by nature. If anyone blocked their path, they would chase them out of the way, or even kill them. The soul beast army started to devolve into a mess as a result of the fear and panic that now engulfed them. A large number of them started to attack and trample their fellows, making them lose their bearings instantly. The three-headed scarlet devil mastiff let loose a series of wild roars, but how could he do anything about the situation? The deadly rays their opponents used were too terrifying, to the point where even though the soul beasts were terrified by his might, they still didn't dare to charge ahead. Enraged, the Scarlet King started to fly forward with a group of powerhouses. He intended to rush forward and launch a frontal assault. However, the all-terrain soul forts on the city walls bent down, revealing the enormous cannon on their heads. The center of the soul forts shot out small, unremarkable balls of red light. This time around, the rays of light felt entirely different from the first time. As though a glass of cold water had been poured over his head, the Scarlet King immediately came to his senses. Who would be willing to send themselves to their own deaths? Looking at the current situation, they'd only suffer even more casualties if they continued fighting. After calming down a bit, the Scarlet King let out another roar. Retreat. The great soul beast army had arrived quickly, but retreated even more quickly. Due to the chaos on the battlefield, they left behind a large number of corpses which flickered with the light of soul rings. Shizing's mouth was still gaping. He didn't know what to say. Sun Swen had previously guaranteed to help stall the beast tide for 2 hours to allow the soldiers to get some rest. However, he was able to forcibly push back the beast tide instead. Was this the awesomeness of the Tang Sect? By only relying on 361 people and 61 all-terrain soul forts, they were able to force back an army of soul beasts that numbered in the tens of thousands. A glorious result like that undoubtedly overshadowed that of the Shrek City defense army. However, Shizing only felt excitement. With the Tang Sect strength, what was there to fear from that army of soul beasts? This was especially the case the moment they started firing their main cannons. Since even 10,000-year soul beasts couldn't block them, who would dare to approach them? It seemed like there was hope of defending the city. Go down and collect those soul rings. Sun Swen handed down another command. Right after that, the all-terrain soul fort he controlled suddenly leapt off the city walls and soared into the sky. After that, a few jet holes and a pair of wings appeared on his seemingly cumbersome all-terrain soul fort. With a surge of soul power, it actually flew him down to the battlefield. The other all-terrain soul forts started moving as well. Though they didn't have the capability to fly, their long legs allowed them to descend from the city walls like enormous spiders. Their 8 sharp legs allowed them to secure a foothold on the sturdy city walls and descend quickly towards the soul beast corpses. Dean Shen, what are they trying to do? Shizing couldn't help but ask Shen Liner. Shen Liner's expression shifted slightly, and she said helplessly, they're probably trying to not waste anything. Right, they were trying to not waste anything. As Shizing looked on dumbstruck, a large number of soul rings started vanishing at a quick rate. It seemed like there was a mystical absorption force quickly absorbing the soul rings around them. Moreover, they were specially looking for purple and black soul rings, and were also ruffling through the corpses. Sun Swen, who had risen into the air, had a clear objective, the 100,000-year soul ring and soul bone left behind by the six-winged devil tiger. The instant he was within range, they immediately vanished. After that, the whole master of the Tang Sect soul tool hall turned his soul fort around and flew back to Shrek City. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.